This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dani Walley, and this is the Late Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Tonight, we're talking teaching and learning, reviewing Classroom Crazes Part 2. Are we all truly wired to learn differently, or are learning styles a myth that have held classrooms back? Does fostering a growth mindset really unlock student potential, or did this just become a buzzword? Join me tonight and let's see if these trends transform.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dani Walley, and this is the Late Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you so much for listening. If you are joining me live tonight and you've got something to say, drop me a text on the Podbean app, or even give me a call and have a chat with me. If you're listening on social media, then please let me know what you think. I will always try and reply to comments if I'm tagged in them, and I really love hearing your opinion, particularly when we follow with a show like tonight, where it's all about audience participation. You guys tuning in and telling me what your thoughts are as we evaluate some of our trends. So we are following the success of Classroom Crazes Part 1, where we had a bit of a showdown between direct instruction and cooperative learning. And we were really evaluating about whether they've helped the students. So, we all remember these being fads, I think was the language that I was using, and trends. And we talked about whether they actually had a positive impact on the students or not. And did they really drive outcomes, and are they something that we should revisit, or actually is it a good thing that we've moved on from them? So this week we are going to have a showdown between learning styles and growth mindset, and again we're going to go back to that idea of, have they tumbled, or have they actually made a positive impact on the students that we teach and on the teachers really, and the practice of the teachers. So like I said, I'd need your input. Please text in and please talk to me throughout, and I'll definitely make sure that I read out your comments. So I thought we'd start with learning styles. Now, what's really funny is when we first did part 1, and I was saying, we're going to go over some of the trends of classrooms or whatever, and I'd listed quite a few that had sprung to mind, and I was talking about, cooperative learning and growth mindset and all these different ones. And actually, it was my amazing live listeners that were talking to me on the chat saying, you've got to talk about learning styles, visual, kinesthetic, auditory. And I was like, oh my God, how did I forget that? Because I think actually learning styles, especially when you think about evaluating pedagogy, is an oldie, but it is a goodie to reflect on and dissect a little bit. So in a nutshell, what are learning styles? Okay, so it's the theory, in essence, that students will learn better when they are being taught in their preferred learning style. So teachers of the time would have to put students through some sort of assessment, normally a questionnaire, often done on computers. And that questionnaire would ask them a number of questions, and it would come out at the end and say whether they were a visual learner. And if they were a visual learner, then they would prefer information being presented to them, obviously through visuals and pictorials, like diagrams and pie charts and things like that. And if it came out that they were an auditory learner, then it would be that they prefer to listen and they retain information better through kind of verbal explanations, discussions, etc. Or if they were a kinesthetic learner, then they would learn better through hands-on activities like, moving around the classroom, or, physically building something, etc. And I have to put my hands up a little bit, while we dissect this one. I was not a teacher at the time of this being a fad. And I'm going to really show this now. I was a student. I genuinely can remember being sat in an ICT suite at my school, which I won't name, and doing this questionnaire as a student. And I think I was about year 10, I would say. I think I was definitely key stage 4. And I remember doing this questionnaire and being like, why are we doing this? But I also remember that I came out as a kinesthetic learner. And I'm sat here now at 34, so, 20 years later, and thinking, I really value learning, and I, make sure that I'm learning regularly, and I'm always engaging in research and books and things like that just because I enjoy it. But do I think I am a kinesthetic learner, kind of knowing myself at this point of life as well as I do? No, I don't. I think for those who know me, who are probably having a little giggle, I'm absolutely an extrovert. There's no doubt about that. Drama queen through and through. And I did love a drama lesson. And to this day, I really enjoy public speaking and whatever. But I think I'm really struggling as I reflect when I was planning the show, which I always do. I think I hate this word, but I think the differentiation here for me is I preferred drama lessons and getting up and walking around and talking to my friends, or, being a bit bossy in a group project. But do I honestly think I learned better that way? Do I think I retained information better that way? And I don't think I did. But I absolutely appreciate that as a highly subjective opinion. But yeah, I mean, let me know. Talk to me on the chat. Do you remember what you were? Do you remember doing this as a teacher or a student? Do you remember which VAK you were? Were you visual? Were you audio? Were you kinesthetic? And do you remember any particular lessons where the students met this need? Because again, so while planning the show and kind of doing my research, because I don't want anyone trolling me for being incorrect, what really struck me when I was looking into this as a teaching and learning fad was this idea that teachers were absolutely expected to adopt every single lesson to cater for the learning styles for their students. So it was absolutely expected that within one lesson, you would have a group where you say, right, you go in, talk about it. And then you'd have a group where you gave them a picture and they would, annotate it. And then you had a group where they would, get up and move around the room or build a model. And I just can't comprehend that. And, again, please talk to me if you've been teaching a long time, but as a teacher in 2024, I can't believe that we had a situation where, in essence, teachers were planning 3 lessons, certainly 3 tasks, certainly 3 different types of activity to cater to the needs of the students. And again, when I was looking into this, a lot of when I was really questioning this appeal, why did this take off as a trend? Why did this appeal? A lot of kind of what I was getting from reading between the lines is that teachers actually quite like the clarity. So teachers quite liked that clarity of how to meet individual need and individual demand. And I think I'm mentioning that because that got me thinking as well. So again, for those of you who are newly listening, thank you for listening. I am a teaching and learning lead in my academy. And one of the things that I find when we ask for staff feedback that always comes up as an area for professional development is adaptive teaching. And I find that staff, I think what I'm saying is now we've moved to that ambiguous term of adaptive teaching, where it is a little bit more, check for understanding, check for listening, and react to what is happening in your classroom in front of you. And if your children don't understand, then stop, approach your exposition in a different way, reteach if you need to. That almost accepting and respecting a teacher's autonomy in their classroom to react to what's in front of them, I feel personally is what we've moved towards. And when I look back at this and think, I can't imagine standing in front of my staff and saying, you have to do 3 completely different tasks to meet the needs of your 3 different styles of learners to make sure that they have positive outcomes. I just personally imagine that if I was to present that to my staff tomorrow, say on a professional development session, they would come back to me and say, workload. Dani, we're not doing that. That's 3 sets of printing. That's 3 different types of activity. Going off on a tangent, maybe this, if there is merit on this, and we'll absolutely go through it on the show, but maybe this is where AI comes in. Maybe this is where artificial intelligence maybe does allow teachers to present a task in 3 different ways. Maybe if we agree that this is something that's transformed our classroom and something that we want to hang on to, then maybe that's the way forward for learning styles. Let's see. So again, talk to me on the chat. Tell me, what do you think? Do you remember anything to do with learning styles? Did you value it? Did you find it effective within your classroom? as I always do, I've managed to get a little bit of research here on the effectiveness of learning styles, because I think, when we're evaluating these fads within a classroom, I think it's really important that we come at this from an evidence point of view. So I just want to share some of these with you. So I've got here, there is a huge lack of scientific evidence, actually, but I want to really present clarity here. There is a lack of evidence that directly relates learning styles to an improvement in pupil outcomes. What I can find, in fairness, is evidence for students preferring their lessons. So the lesson is presented to them in a way that they prefer and they enjoy, therefore increases engagement, which does seem to correlate with outcomes. And I think, for those of you listening live, that absolutely resonates. That makes perfect sense. Of course, teaching students through activities that they enjoy would increase their engagement and therefore their outcomes. But what I thought was interesting here, I've got a study from Pashlet et al. In 2008, who found no evidence that matching teaching to a student's preferred learning style improved learning outcomes at all. And I got another one. I'm just quickly trying to find it on my notes. I've got another one that was actually a meta-analysis, which, again, is really interesting because that's actually looking at a greater body of research. Here we go. Caulfield et al. Found no reliable evidence at all that teaching in a student's preferred learning style directly improved outcomes. But what I will say is I do think, and I suppose I'm a little bit biased having kind of torn apart direct instruction on this show 2 weeks ago, one of the biggest critiques that my amazing audience were saying with direct instruction is that where direct instruction is often misunderstood, and because it is complicated, is often seen through teaching staff as I really don't want to say excuse, but almost like a reason to do a big amount of teacher exposition and to spend quite a lot of time talking to the students, that actually that means that they disengage and they switch off. And one of the things that we were talking it was permeating through everything we were saying, in fairness, last week was, do we need to do something now that does re-engage our students a little bit? Has the conversation regarding education gone a little bit too far into behaviour in a post-COVID world and meeting the demands using AI and technology, etc., of our students to re-engage them? And does it mean that we've stopped considering how to get students to engage in their learning? And I think what I'm trying to say here is, although the research evidence, it's black and white in front of me, is suggesting that teaching students in a way that reflects their learning style does not lead to a direct impact on improving outcomes, what it does do is improve their engagement. And I think what I'm saying is, if we can improve student engagement, surely we're improving student outcomes. I don't know, just a little thought for me to ponder there. Again, talk to me on the chat. Let me know what you think. And like I say, if you've got any experiences, please share, please talk to me, and let me know how you found it. Oh, I've got one on the chat. Thank you, Joanne. So I've got one here. So, could you not argue that DI does increase engagement through active participation and frequent interaction? Yeah, 100%, Joanne. And I really appreciate you saying that, actually, because I'm always conscious when I talk about direct instruction that I talk about it from a point of view that staff often misunderstand it. And you're absolutely right. When it isn't misunderstood, when it is taken, and we talked last time about the Engelman version, when it is taken at its core, the whole point of direct instruction is kind of constant participation and engagement from students. So I completely agree, Joanne, and I really appreciate your point in the chat. I think what I'm saying is, where direct instruction is so often misunderstood or so often used as a justification for quite a lot of heavy teacher exposition, I'm almost trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and say, is that the reason that we lose students in terms of their engagement? And again, we want to evaluate these trends. I don't just want to trash them. And I think what I'm trying to say with learning styles is, if it doesn't impact on outcomes, is it that it positively impacts upon engagement? And is that something that maybe pedagogically we've lost within our classrooms? But I'll say it again. I sound like I'm begging now, guys. But please talk to me and tell me what you think, because I'm always conscious on the show when we chat that I'm always coming from one perspective. And as much as I really do try and balance it out, it would be great to hear from people from different school settings, and let me know what you think. One of the quotes that I thought I would share with you from some of the literature that I looked at preparing for the show, reference learning styles. And it said that the failure of learning styles is that it never taught for the content. And actually, I've got a quote here that says we should teach for the content and not the learner. And what they were advocating is that rather than teaching for students' preferred learning, so rather than saying this is the task for the visual learners and this is the task for the kinesthetic learners, what we should be doing is teach for the task. So we should be analysing the information that we're teaching and sharing. And actually, as subject experts within our classroom, we should be making a decision about how that information is best presented. So I tried to dive into that a little bit, and what it was basically talking about is this idea of, if you are teaching geometry, then one of the best ways to teach geometry is through visual prompts, and it's through diagrams and through visually showing the students, rather than teaching them by rote, 2 triangles make a rectangle, show them on the board. And it made me think about geography. So one of my previous roles, I was the director of humanities, and I know that I was so blessed and grateful to work with an absolutely outstanding geography department, and they would always teach through diagrams. So for example, I remember looking at lots of lessons where the only thing that was on the board was a picture of a diagram, and the teacher would talk over it, and then afterwards they would stop, and then the student would annotate their diagram. And I suppose really it's that move, isn't it, towards dual coding. And I think that's really where learning style seems to have evolved to. We seem to have gone from this idea of presenting information to students in a way that suits them to trying to actually use evidence-based information like dual coding to present information to students in a way that will actually help their understanding. So for me, this really got me thinking about how learning styles can really combine with some of the evidence that we've got and this kind of multimodal approach, because actually cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience really advocates for that now, doesn't it? I think we've had a real move in our profession of people engaging and reading cognitive neuropsychology, and that informing our profession as to how to teach students in the best way, which I absolutely love and think is amazing. But it's that acceptance now, isn't it, that we process information through multiple senses, but equally we can't have cognitive overload where we present too much information to those senses at the same time. And that got me thinking, really, I teach every day, and I'm trying to imagine one of my classrooms with 32 children in there, having a group of 10 on one side saying, annotate this diagram and this picture, and then having a group in the middle saying, you sit and discuss them and listen to each other, and almost imagining the noise that goes with that. And then having a group on the other side of the classroom and saying, you act it out, you create me some sort of freeze frame, or even walk around the room and do a quiz trade, or whatever it is to kind of get them moving. And I can't help but think that classroom would be carnage. That is not a calm and purposeful learning environment. And I think it goes back to, again, what we were saying 2 weeks ago, really, with a lot of these fads, where I personally feel like we missed the mark a little bit because we didn't get that balance. I think we as teachers, I used the phrase last time, this pendulum swing where we're kind of all in something or nothing. And I think, again, this seems to be what's happened with learning styles. We kind of threw ourselves in with 2 feet and said, right, this is what we're doing. We're going to assess every child. We're going to adapt to every lesson. We're going to meet every need. And I think it just went too far. And I personally think, but please share your experiences with me, I think personally what seems to have happened then, certainly from the reading that I've done, is that it diverted teachers away from evidence-based practices like retrieval and active learning and all of these things that we know actually has a really positive impact, and possibly misled teachers into spending time making resources on actually what turned out to be an ineffective strategy. And it seems to me a little bit like we've almost uncovered that and realised that, and then made the decision that we're almost going to abandon it and move on. And certainly in the time that I've been teaching, I haven't heard any reference really in any professional development to learning styles anymore. So it just feels strange to me that this was something that was so at the forefront of our professional development as a profession, just seems to have been, almost so discarded. So a little bit of a reflection from me there. So like I say, please talk to me, drop me a text on the app, let me know what you think, share an experience with me. Were you taught through learning styles? Do you know what your preferred learning style was? Or were you a teacher at the time teaching through preferred learning styles? And actually, what was your experience? Was it too much on your workload, or do you look back now and think actually it made an impact? Okay, I'm going to go to the chat quickly before we have a quick word from our sponsors. So I've got a message on the chat that says, I'm a big fan of generative learning techniques such as flowcharts to allow students to make connections and integrate new knowledge with what they already know with existing knowledge. It promotes active engagement and deeper learning. Yeah, I completely agree. But isn't it interesting, Joanne, that in that comment on the chat, in essence, generative learning techniques and what you're kind of advocating with now with the connections and the flowcharts and things like that is a visual learning strategy. So, I would almost push that back a little bit, and I'm just being devil's advocate, may I add, but I would say, well, what if somebody in your room was a auditory learner? And that isn't their preferred learning style. Does that mean even though you as a subject expert think that's the best way to present that knowledge, should you actually be meeting the need of the child that I suppose has been given to you if they've done a questionnaire? I am playing devil's advocate, Joanne, but I'd love you to get back to me on the chat and let me know what you think about that. I've got another one in the chat that says, I think learning styles can inform planning, but shouldn't dictate how we teach. There's a danger of learning becoming more of a gimmick. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I completely agree. And I think that comes back to what we were saying before, where I'm a big advocate, as you know, for teacher agency. And I think actually, as much as I'm, hear lots of conversations now about we've got to make sure teachers have got agency within their classroom, I actually think, evaluating this, which was clearly a fad 20 years ago, I would actually say I think we have moved towards a little bit more teacher agency in the classroom now. And I think we do seem to, again, just possibly my personal experience, but I do think we seem to respect a little bit more that each individual teacher has a specific style potentially, or, I think we certainly respect that they know their students and they know their subject, and therefore they know the best way to deliver their subject. And if they don't, then they should be working through their curriculum documents and with their departments to learn how. And that's part of the professional development. I mentioned earlier in the show that I can imagine the impact if we tried to roll this out across a whole school now and said everybody's got to test every child and has got to have 3 different tasks in a lesson. I can just imagine the screams about workload and teacher well-being. But it just seems so interesting to me that this was such a prevalent teaching and learning technique 20 years ago. Anyway, thank you so much for your input on the chat. I really do appreciate it. It stops it just being my thoughts and my voice all the time, which I do really appreciate. I'm going to pause now and just give us a moment by going to a word to our sponsors. I will be back in a minute. Please don't go anywhere.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour, and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at Bet UK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at Bet UK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
Okay, welcome back everybody. I am Dani Walley and this is the Late Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Tonight we're looking at Classroom Crazes Part 2 and we're looking at the trends that transformed or tumbled within our classroom. Now this week we are talking about learning styles versus growth mindset. And I was just thinking then that, I think we've come to the decision, thank you for the input on the chat, that learning styles haven't really held up scientifically. But I do think they have brought about important conversations about individual differences and about teaching, and therefore have kind of brought that teaching diversity to the forefront of our minds. And I think, whatever we've kind of decided tonight about its impact, I think actually at the end of the day, if we can combine what we've learned through evidence-based practice with, fads or trends or things like this from our past that I think we're all in agreement we wouldn't just pick up and implement tomorrow as our main pedagogical approach. But I do think there is merit in some of it to do with, taking things out to do with student engagement. Someone in the chat earlier said that there is actually a little bit of helpfulness really in informing our planning with considering students' learning styles. And I think it's that idea, isn't it, of taking something with a pinch of salt and implementing it alongside other strategies that maybe do have a bit more of an evidence-based background behind them. But what that conversation has done is set the stage quite nicely for our next discussion. So our second trend or fad within teaching and learning that we're going to talk about tonight, which is growth mindset. Now, growth mindset is a little bit more recent than learning styles. It's actually quite a core idea within psychology, so not necessarily an educational trend, if you would. It was psychology that was applied to the classroom. And it was developed by a psychologist, by Carol Dweck, who basically proposed this idea that if we believe that intelligence and ability and skills and talents can develop through effort, then actually that will have a positive impact on the students and on the outcomes. And actually, as practitioners within our classroom, we need to make an active effort to praise effort and strategy with our children in order to be able to encourage them to develop a growth mindset. Now, Dweck goes on to say that a child can either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is that idea or that assumption that intelligence and abilities are innate and unchangeable. So, if you ever heard a child say, I'm not very good at maths, that in itself is a fixed mindset because it's that idea that they're just not very good at it and they're never going to be very good at it. And I've worked within maths departments previously in my career, and I know that I speak for maths teachers everywhere where I say that is an absolute bugbear of maths teachers across the country. And it's not just children, it's adults. I've sat through countless parents' evenings where parents have sat in front of me and said, oh yeah, she's not very good at maths because I'm not, and dad's not either. We're both not very good at maths. And again, that assumption there straight away is that, mathematical ability is somehow inherited and the parents can't do it and therefore the child can't. And that's the end of that. There's not really a lot of point in trying. And I do sympathise really with maths teachers. Those of you who are very confused by this conversation, I was a maths teacher, I'm not a maths teacher anymore. But I do really sympathise with maths teachers, particularly having been there. It does present certainly a boundary and a barrier that I feel like maths teachers are constantly working to overcome. But let's not write it off yet. Let's go through a couple more points really, because The theory is a little bit deeper than just saying growth mindset or fixed mindset. And actually, it goes on to emphasize really the importance of embracing challenge. And it gives the example really of teachers seeing mistakes within a classroom as opportunities for growth and really trying to capitalize on those with the students. And we talked about this idea of kind of a shift in feedback, for example. So teachers had professional development training on how to make sure that their feedback shifted from praising intelligence and saying, you're so smart or you're so clever, and started to praise effort and strategy and say, you really put a lot of work into that piece of homework or whatever. That was brilliant. And it makes me chuckle every time because it's still plastered on the walls of our classroom now. But the power of yet was quite big, wasn't it? And was quite strongly associated with growth mindset. And that idea of kind of correcting children in the moment and saying, if they say, I can't do this, you say, no, you can't do it yet. You can't do it yet. Now, again, I'm always reflecting. I really see that there is actually a real strength in that. And again, I'm thinking back a little bit more to my maths teaching days, because I do think where you've got students that are a little bit more closed off to their learning, that does tend to happen more in I would say STEM subjects really than it does, in the subject I teach at the moment, which is history. But I remember my mantra with every year 11 class that I picked up every year was, I know you don't feel like you're very good at maths right now. And I literally remember the classroom, and I was introducing simultaneous equations. And I remember saying to my quite fragile class at the time, I knew that they were quite down in the dumps about their ability in maths. Maybe it was just after the mock exams. And I remember giving them, a speech almost on my little soapbox and saying, like, what I'm about to teach you is difficult. You're not going to understand it the first time, but you will understand it by the end. And I remember almost like pledging my sword and saying, I will not give up until you understand this. And I suppose I'm reflecting a little bit and probably going on a bit of a rant, I'm sorry, but I think I'm reflecting a little bit on, is that what growth mindset is saying? Are we actively, as practitioners within our classroom, projecting this idea that children can get better and that we believe in them and we won't give up on them and everything is improvable? That idea of practice is what makes perfect. So yeah, let me know what are your thoughts on growth mindset, particularly if you've sat through professional development in this or anything like that. Have you got an experience maybe that you can share where you've, come up against this in a classroom, somebody saying they can't do something or whatever? I've written on my notes as well here when I was planning the show, one of the things as well that I do think is quite key with resilience, and I'm trying to look within the context of, I'm trying to avoid saying social media, but the messages I would say that I get through social media from fellow colleagues about their experiences within education at the moment. And I would say there's a real mutual understanding. Maybe it's a COVID thing. Maybe we blame too much on COVID. Maybe that's another discussion. But actually, is it that children need to focus on resilience? And actually, is growth mindset as a strategy a tool that we can use within our classroom to encourage our children to develop resilience? And again, I suppose I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit and trying to almost advocate for growth mindset in the sense of, I personally, again, I know I've just given you a maths example, but I can think of countless examples where I constantly think I wish the children would have a little bit more resilience when we take on something difficult and something challenging, and almost be okay to get it wrong. We mentioned before that Dweck talks about the power of mistakes. I find personally that a lot of my children will spend time in the classroom trying to avoid making a mistake. And that might be a girl under the guise of wanting her book to be beautifully presented with pink annotations and therefore doesn't want to quickly write anything down because they don't want it to make their book look messy. But either way, it's that idea of, I don't personally think, and I'm reflecting on my classroom, the children are naturally coming to me in Key Stage 4 with a mistakes help us learn attitude. I don't know, share your experiences with me. I'm going to go to the chat now because I've noticed I've got a couple of messages, and I think it's really important. So I believe that children grow when you have faith in them. Children are too often labelled as naughty or bad. Yeah, I totally agree with that. 100%. Those children have the most potential to grow, and I love putting my belief and trust in them. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's that self-fulfilling prophecy as well, isn't it? That idea of, if we don't believe that they're going to get better and we don't believe that they're going to grow, then they're not. It'd be interesting, Natty, I've just noticed your comment. It'd be interesting to see how you think that applies with growth mindset and that idea of, are we showing children that we've got faith in them if we're praising their efforts? Because I don't know, what do you think? I personally think if someone said to me, you've worked really hard on that, I appreciate I'm quite tenacious, but I think I would go back and say, like, yeah, but do you like it? Is it good? What grade is it? And I don't know really in a classroom whether we can totally move away from that. I don't know if, it's important to acknowledge when somebody's really tried on something. I absolutely agree with that. But I don't know, is it enough? Is it enough, I suppose, is my question there. Okay, another one in the chat. Growth mindset can be powerful, but it has to be part of a school culture to be successful. Yes, I absolutely agree with this. I think promoting failures in the classroom as a learning opportunity rather than a reflection of their abilities. And it also develops resilience, which is such an important quality, especially in disadvantaged schools. Yeah, thank you so much for your comment there, Joanna. I completely agree. And I also think it's not just a culture, it's also that idea of staff really understanding what it means at its merit. I think if you've got somebody just kind of taking that half approach to saying, yeah, you've put some effort in, or yeah, good try, I think maybe that's where it becomes patronising, and that's where the children don't necessarily buy into that belief as much. And I feel like that's what you're alluding to there with that comment. It's got to be embraced as a culture in almost its true essence. It's really interesting, Joanne, though, that you've actually referenced there about disadvantaged schools, because I always do my research, and I have actually got a little bit of research here from Yeager et al. I'm sorry if I haven't said that well, although they're definitely not listening, so I think I'll be okay. And they did a large-scale study in 2015, and they found that a brief growth mindset intervention does improve academic performance, especially for at-risk students. Now, this one got me thinking, is resilience and this idea of a growth mindset, and it's an honest question, so don't shoot me down in the chat, but does it correlate with disadvantaged backgrounds? Is this something potentially that children are maybe not getting exposed to as much outside of school, and therefore it's even more important that we do that inside of school if we're constantly trying to close the gap? And again, it'd be really interesting because I do think it's interesting that you've referenced disadvantaged schools before I even got onto that piece of research. So please come back to me and let me know. Okay, back to the chat. We've got, it's definitely enough to recognise effort. Yeah, I agree. And then another one, but to have maximum impact, it has to have buy-in from all staff where students get the same message from lesson to lesson. Yeah, I totally agree. But again, it's that, if everybody's saying the same thing, does it lose its integrity? Does it lose its feeling of, a real genuineness in the message? Again, let me know your thoughts. So let's go and have a little look at the research then. So Dweck's early studies, so obviously Carol Dweck herself has tested her own theory there, so take that with a pinch of salt. But her early studies showed that students with a growth mindset were more likely to persevere in challenging tasks and therefore achieve better outcomes. And again, to me, that isn't a cause and effect relationship. That is noticing that if a child is happy to participate or engage in a challenging task, that they improve outcomes. And I think that's something that we would all agree with. But to me, that isn't concrete enough to show that a growth mindset is enough to encourage a child to take part in a challenging task. I think having a culture, Joanne, I feel like you used that word earlier, having a culture in schools where children know that they won't be penalised for a mistake is absolutely imperative if you're pushing a level of challenge. But I don't know if growth mindset for me is enough to lead to academic outcomes, having reviewed some, but I appreciate not all, of this research. Growth mindset encourages students to focus on process-based learning, which does actually align with cognitive science principles like deliberate practice. I also started thinking about this one in terms of metacognition. And actually, you know, we talked before about has learning styles allowed us to kind of morph, I'm going to use the word morph, into this acceptance of a multimodal model, and has it potentially morphed or led the way for dual coding? Is this one where growth mindset has potentially morphed into, or certainly led space for, metacognition, and that conversation with children about how they learn and how they revise? And actually, if we can empower students with an understanding about how they learn and how best to revise, is that going to have more of a positive impact on student outcomes than growth mindset, you know, than having that positive attitude toward mistakes and toward challenge? Oh, Joe, you've come back to me on the chat. I love this. In response to you, students in disadvantaged schools may face lower expectations from themselves or socioeconomic factors, and embracing a growth mindset would boost confidence among these students, increasing the belief that they can achieve. Oh, very articulately put there. Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, and like I say, you know, the research reflects that. And I do think, you know, I teach in a heavily disadvantaged school. And that's the community I serve, and I'm so proud to serve it. But I think that's because I notice a lot how things like a positive culture and kindness and having a psychologically safe environment for the students where they know that they can come in and learn and feel safe and answer questions. I really see the impact of that with those students. And I totally concur, Joanne. And actually, maybe growth mindset is something that we do need to focus on a little bit more in order to be able to support our students. Maybe this is something that we're missing when we're having these conversations about closing the gap. This is potentially something, and again, we will vote. I'd be really grateful to see what your thoughts are, but maybe this is something that we've moved away from in education and we've left by the wayside, and actually we shouldn't have done. Maybe we need to go back and pick it back up and look at it again within our classroom. But to present a balanced argument, just a little bit of research that suggests really that the impact of growth mindset has been modest. I've got a study here that was published in Nature in 2019 that said that while mindset interventions can boost motivation, their effect on academic performance is actually really small and varies based on context. And I feel like that, you know, very much chimes in with the conversation that we've just had. And I've got another critique here really that says telling students to have a growth mindset is not enough. It requires ongoing teacher support, meaningful feedback, and again, a culture, which again is the conversation that we've just had. I suppose the question I'm asking though is, does it do any harm? And I feel like I'm arguing with myself now, but you know, sometimes you have to. I think in my head, I'm thinking, even if the impact, or, you know, I'm sure we could get a Hattie's effect size here, and I'm sure with growth mindset, it wouldn't be huge, but does it take away from anything? You know, you're not implementing growth mindset at the detriment of something else. It's not like learning styles, which we've evaluated today, where that really is your pedagogical approach, because let's be honest, you haven't got time in a lesson to do any more than 3 completely separate tasks to meet learning styles. So actually, I would argue that taking a certainly approach to your pedagogy based on learning styles would probably be of detriment to student outcomes. So therefore, I think we kind of agreed together on the chat that it's not something we should be doing in its entirety. But I think one of the conclusions I'm coming to as we're talking this through is that potentially growth mindset has got the room here to be a really positive add-on and to be something that we can do as well as direct instruction and retrieval practice, and being aware of cognitive load. Maybe this is something we can do as well. And maybe that's something that we should look at. It definitely isn't a quick fix. And I think actually where some of the criticisms that I was reading about growth mindset have come from are people suggesting that growth mindset kind of some people take the approach that they try and use it as a quick fix, where actually there's much deeper systemic issues like poverty or inequality or lack of resources. And, there are certain occasions where did it give a teacher a get out of jail free card almost, where it was like, yeah, but that student has a fixed mindset. That maths teacher, for example, that isn't necessarily making any progress and is saying, yeah, but the students have got a fixed mindset. Was it used as a projection? And I don't know. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Was it, does it give teachers, if that's your only approach, does it give them a way of saying, well, it wasn't me, it was the mindset? Okay, back over to the chat. So thinking back to your previous shows, you could argue that the link to the behaviour curriculum and growth mindset is improving behaviour outcomes as well. Yeah, I love that. We all know I really love a behaviour curriculum. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And maybe this is where that space for growth mindset is that projection of positivity and a belief in the children, and a belief really that we believe they can improve and we believe that they can achieve. I'm reflecting as we talk now about, I've delivered behaviour curriculum assemblies and refreshers this week. And one of the key messages that I repeat regularly to the students throughout the assembly is that the reason I want this for them and the reason we're doing a behaviour curriculum is because I believe that they can succeed, and I'm helping them in how to be successful at my school. And I agree with you that actually, if we were to interweave growth mindset messages through that and that idea of, but we have to work hard and we will face challenges, but we need to be resilient in how we overcome them, and almost explicitly teaching that, I absolutely think there's a room for that in the behaviour curriculum. I'm really appreciating the comments in the chat. It's really definitely got me thinking about some of these strategies. And like I say, I'd looked at them before the show, but I hadn't considered that. And I really appreciate that feedback. I'm going to swap over before we do our vote. I'm going to just move to a quick word from our sponsors and obviously the latest news. And then I will see you back here just afterwards. Please don't go away. And we're going to do our final vote on whether we are taking learning styles and growth mindset and putting them back in the classroom because we see their value, or are we trashing them and leaving them at the wayside and not coming back to them again because we are grateful that we've moved forward from them. So have a think. I will see you after the news for the vote.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour, and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at Bet UK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at Bet UK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week features early feedback from the curriculum review led by Professor Becky Francis. According to the article, teachers feel disempowered and deprofessionalised by overstipulation and the challenge to cover content. Professor Francis said the roadshows have so far gathered mixed and diverse views. She spoke at the recent CST conference about how frequent complaints are around how assessment and exams dictate the curriculum, which is often described as overstuffed, and that this has led to the deprioritisation of certain subjects and reduced enrichment activities. Concerns have also been raised about a lack of awareness of vocational routes at post-16. Positive themes have included an appreciation of the ambition for all in the current national curriculum, and reading was mentioned as a thing that has gone well. The TES magazine covers draft proposals for changes to Ofsted's inspection framework. The magazine says Ofsted told sector leaders that teaching could be assessed as a separate category under new draft plans. The watchdog has been sharing its initial plans for inspection areas with a wide range of senior figures in recent weeks, ahead of a formal consultation launch in the new year. A report in the Financial Times has said that Ofsted is also proposing replacing its current grading system with a 5-point scale, in which schools would be rated as being exemplary, strong practice, secure, attention needed, or causing concern in each area. The TES reports there had been another version of the proposals that included a 7-point scale. Head teachers' leaders have raised concerns that Ofsted's plans are too complicated and warned that the Department for Education and the Inspectorate are in a headlong rush to create a new system. The plans involve separating out teaching and the curriculum into separate inspection areas, which have caused concern amongst those who have been consulted, particularly amid the recruitment and retention challenges. Teaching and curriculum are assessed together in the current framework. Ofsted's informal consultation comes after the Inspectorate was warned not to draw up its new framework behind closed doors. Other categories understood to be included in the new report card proposals include attendance, opportunities to thrive, outcomes, behaviour, leadership, preparation for next steps, and also inclusion. An Ofsted source told TES the proposal to make teaching a separate category was not about returning to lesson observations. Instead, it was about making it clear that the focus would be on how teachers are supported. The spokesperson said, "Great teaching is the most important lever schools have to improve pupil attainment for the most disadvantaged pupils." The Guardian reports on young people from working class backgrounds are being blocked from entering the creative industries, which remain elitist according to research. A report from the Sutton Trust found stark overrepresentation in the arts for those from the most affluent backgrounds. About 7% of people educated in the UK attend private fee-paying schools. However, 43% of Britain's best-selling classical musicians and 35% of BAFTA-nominated actors are alumni of private schools. However, pop stars appear to better reflect the educational backgrounds of the UK population, with only 8% privately educated and 20% university educated, which are both close to the national average. The report said, "There are clear class inequalities in creative higher education, and the creative workforce with high-profile creative figures in fields like television more likely to have attended private school and university than the population overall." The Sutton Trust has called for a range of measures to improve access to the arts, with its chief executive saying it is a tragedy that young people from working-class backgrounds are the least likely to study creative arts degrees. Further details, including a range of statistics, can be found in the article on the Guardian website. Finally, the Irish Times features a story on Ryanair's Michael O'Leary, who it says has doubled down on comments he made about teachers, saying he wouldn't generally employ a lot of teachers to go out and get things done. The comments have been condemned by many as insulting and failed to reflect the enormous contribution teachers have made to Irish society and enterprise. Mr. O'Leary was apparently unapologetic and said he was making a serious point. Full details can be found in the Irish Times online. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Dani Walley, and you are listening to The Late Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. Tonight, we have been discussing our classroom crazes, and we have gone over growth mindset, and we've also looked at learning styles. And I feel like, as we did 2 weeks ago, we've kind of come back to this idea that if you were to combine them with what evidence-based research and evidence-based information that we've got, then actually there can be some merit on them. But particularly taking things like learning styles and just picking them up and implementing them in a classroom, I think we're all in agreement would be at detriment to our children. So one of the things that I was thinking about then while we were chatting, just quickly before we do the vote, is if we're saying that we need to combine these with kind of strategies that we're doing at the moment that we know are having more of an impact, then do we need to make sure that teachers have got more access to really high quality professional development on what these strategies are? And again, if I just expand a little bit on that, as you know, I really, teaching is my job, but it's also my hobby and I love it. And I regularly engage with reading and literature and things like that because I enjoy it. But I can't think of an occasion where I have been explicitly taught about cognitive science in terms of teaching and its application, apart from with direct instruction. And I go to quite a lot of conferences and things like this. And I think one of the things that I'm just reflecting on a little bit is I feel like even last week when we were talking about cooperative learning styles, and we said, there is a room for all of these things in terms of stimulating student engagement and making sure that they are attending to their learning and interested in what they're learning. But we also keep going back to, but we need to do it as well as retrieval strategies, and we need to be aware of the forgetting curve, and we need to make sure that our teacher exposition is really clear. And I think one of the things that it got me thinking about is, are these things that we keep falling back on and we keep saying, yeah, but they're the core parts of pedagogy. Are we really providing almost like nationally really high quality PD to all of our teachers for that? Because I oversee teacher training, and I know that a lot of teacher training provisions now do a lot of research and pedagogy, and they do a lot of how students learn and almost the neuroscience behind it. But if you've been in education for 20 years, say, and the last bit of PD that you did was on learning styles, and that was the last time that you were really explicitly taught about this, how are we expecting teachers like that now to keep up and to know about these cognitive psychology, really, that we keep going back to and relying on in our classrooms? So I feel like that would be quite an interesting discussion to talk about in future shows. So while everybody is on the vote, and I'm asking you to vote today on whether you think we need to keep or trash learning styles and growth mindset. So are we keeping it or are we trashing it? So while you guys are voting for me on the chat, and you're just literally typing in whether you want to keep or trash our two fads from today, I was thinking that if anybody has got any preferences or thoughts of what you want us to explore in our next show, then please let me know. If you are listening through the app and not necessarily listening live, then please reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn and just get in touch with me about what you think would be a great show or what you think it'd be good for us to talk about. Because like I say, I'm always listening. Okay, on to the chat then. Okay, so we've got keep but with evolution. Oh, I enjoy that. Oh gosh, we need more money in teacher training to keep it up to date. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, I've got a keep growth mindset. And okay, I feel like the learning styles is not getting a lot of love tonight, which I think is probably fair enough given our evaluation of the evidence. So, okay, jury's in. We are keeping growth mindset, but possibly as an add-on, and we are trashing learning styles. Amazing. My final thought for you tonight, just before we close, and I'm so grateful for everybody that's listened and participated. Thank you so much. But my final thought for tonight is we've done 2 shows now evaluating fads in teaching and learning. What do we think we are currently doing that in 10 years' time is going to be evaluated as a fad? So this is the last bit. I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. What do you think we are currently doing in classrooms that in a couple of years' time will be written off and will be seen as a fad? Oh, I enjoy this. I've got an ooh in the chat that I'm hoping that means that we're really thinking. So I will start off the chat on this one, and I feel like we're all in danger of upsetting somebody here. But I wondered whether instructional coaching. Now, I really advocate for instructional coaching, so please don't write me off on this. I actually lead on instructional coaching in my school with my amazing teaching and learning team. I really, really think instructional coaching has room in our PD programs as teachers. However, I do feel like instructional coaching went through a huge boost where everybody was doing it and everybody wanted to learn about it. And I feel like in a lot of classrooms, it's fizzled out. So I'm thinking out loud, which I probably need to not do. But is instructional coaching the next fad of the future? Can anybody think of any others that we're possibly doing at the moment, we think, which will be evaluated in the future as a fad, almost like we did with learning styles, like, oh, I can't believe we ever did that. If you can, let me know, and you never know. Maybe we'll pick it up in a future show and do a Classroom Craze show on that. I can't believe time is gone. As always, I've absolutely loved it, and I thank you so much to everybody that's listened live and participated and commented on the chat. I couldn't do the show without you because it would just be all about me and my opinion, and no one wants that. So thank you so much, guys. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. And again, if you've got any requests or anything that you think we should be talking about on the show, please reach out to me on Twitter and let me know. And I will see you all in 2 weeks' time. This has been Dani Walley on The Late Late Show. Have a good evening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.